Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, we continue with our show's mini-sode series. As many of you know, we recently launched our mini-sode project with the goal of supporting those of us thinking about or just getting started with a business idea. The series also offers encouragement to others growing and scaling businesses. So please note that this series differs from our normal weekly episodes. On the regular show, as you know, I interview business owners sharing their wisdom and guidance with me. If you love these interviews, don't worry about it because they will continue on this platform every other Tuesday. In our inaugural mini-sode, we talked about how to go about finding and testing a business idea. And building off of that conversation, this week's episode is largely going to focus on success tips for emerging business owners to gracefully transition from employee to entrepreneur. So my faithful sound engineer, Allon Beausoleil,
very good,
who is a non-binary pod to the people business owner, is joining the conversation, and we're just going to riff together about this topic, which is really centered around reintroducing yourself to the world as the badass boss you were meant to be, right?
Awesome.
Yes. So together, it's our goal to amplify the wisdom that so many LGBTQ entrepreneurs have already shared over 100 plus episodes on this podcast, which is all centered around leveraging our rainbow superpowers. So with that, Allon, let's get ready and inspire fellow out bosses.
Let's
right?
inspire some bosses.
I love it. Okay, so what we're going to talk about, we're kind of dividing this interview up into two main sections. The first is, how do we end the employee mindset? So we know that some entrepreneurs have always been entrepreneurs, and if that is you, this might be an interesting show, and maybe some of the concepts apply. Largely who we're targeting are those folks who have already successfully transitioned from employee to entrepreneur, or those folks just thinking about it or going through it right now. So there's some unique considerations with that. And I think what we have going for us, Allon, is that recently we had a guest on our show, Martha Pellegrino, who only a couple of years ago got started in her own business. And she was lucky enough, or we were lucky enough for her to let us know that she wrote this article about gracefully leaving, which you can find on LinkedIn. And I think it provides some really good guidance of what to consider if you are planning to leave your current place of employment. So you're working for someone else, and you're trying to navigate that very tricky part of, I really like this place, or even if you don't really like this place, how do you leave with grace? And how do you set up the next person to step into your role with success? And so there's a couple of things that she shares in this article that I just like to share the framework, and then we'll talk a little bit about it, Allon. But she gives us a couple of guiding factors here, and I think, let's see here. She keeps it simple. So there's four big things that she wants us to consider. And so for many folks in that place right now of leaving your place of employment, here's some things to think through. She wants you to make a plan. So this is all about the timeline. If you're giving yourself a deadline of, at the end of this year, I am not going to be in this job anymore, what are the things that you need to accomplish before you give your notice to people to really make sure that your transition is successful and you're setting people up for success? So the plan is basically, the blueprint, and we know that life sometimes trumps our plans, but at least we have one in place. She also talks about the importance of communicating, and really in this, your words are everything. So what you say in your resignation letter, the conversations that you have with higher ups before you leave, the important stakeholders that need to know in advance of telling everyone, that this is really an important part of the conversation, and that you're having preparation with the announcement, how it goes out, and then also the tone that you set. So if you're hopeful, if you're optimistic, hey, I had a great time working here. Here's all the amazing things together that we accomplished as a team. And, I believe with my departure, you all will only be stronger because the successor coming in is going to do even more amazing work. Something like that can definitely inspire confidence for other people instead of being sad and feeling like no one can ever step in your shoes again,
It's like whoever hired them did such a good job that they just had to leave or something.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you've got to have that positive note. you're setting up other people to kind of follow you and how you're constructing the narrative of what you did when you were there and also kind of what to expect like once you leave, and that there's also a big blue ocean for the next person to come in and take your work even to the next level. The last two things that she shares with us are expressing appreciation and then doing it again and again. So knowing that like whatever you accomplish when you were working in this organization, you did so as a team. And so it's really important to kind of acknowledge people that helped you along the way because that again kind of leaves that positive impression. Like people are seen, they felt valued, they feel like you are just simply acknowledging the work that they did with you as a group.
And a show of respect as well.
Absolutely. It's respect and affirmation. And then I think like the last thing that she shares with this kind of you're leaving your job to move forward with your entrepreneurial pursuits is the fact that you need to let it go. At some point, you're going to give people notice. It could be 2 weeks. It could be, 2 months. It's this idea that once you've said the words that you need to say and you've appreciated people and you've done all the activities that you can, you're leaving. And whatever happens with that job, maybe they fill it, maybe they don't. You have to be okay with that because you no longer are there to influence the organization. Hopefully, like there will be capable hands to pick up that work. Anyway, that's kind of a framework that I think is helpful to move out of the employee mindset. So, Allon, like with that framework, so making the plan, communicating, expressing appreciation, and letting go. Like when you think back on your own days before you stepped out, going into being a musician full time, going into doing sound engineering, helping people create amazing podcasts. I mean, does some of this stuff resonate with you, or was your experience a little bit different?
No, that definitely, because if you leave on good terms, then those people are going to think of you for your own business that you've started as well. Don't burn bridges.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's key, like not burning bridges. So, let's use this. So Martha's a badass boss, but she was also a badass employee, and she did some really amazing things here with the city of Portland. So she certainly has positive relationships. She viewed the job that she left as her dream job. So let's just say you're leaving maybe a nightmare job or a job that was like not so fulfilling. I think what Allon is saying is still apropos, like it still applies, which is don't burn bridges because you never know, even if the job itself wasn't that great or some of the people weren't that great, there still may be other folks that really appreciated the fact that you were there. And so long as you're still talking positively about the experience, at least kind of publicly facing, they're more inclined to kind of see that integrity and want to at least like wish you well. But who knows? They might be able to connect you with potential work or whatever your business pursuit. They might be the first big super fan that you have that's going to be an ambassador.
And also they might be asking themselves why you left.
Yes. Yeah.
And then that's good for them. So if you, like her article is saying, leaving with grace. So you can be graceful and not happy about it at the same time. Doesn't mean you have to be aggressive about it.
Absolutely. And that, I think what you're saying with that too, Allon, of like why you left, it speaks to this concept of controlling the narrative, right? Mm-hmm. So you have control with who knows what, who knows where you're going. And it's important to lead with that rather than here's my 2 weeks notice, see you, it's been great. Like if you're not giving people enough information, that might be room enough for fodder for gossip, right? Mm-hmm. And people might start making assumptions about what was happening and, relationships that might have gone sideways or, a project or work assignment that caused you to get fired, even if that's not the case, right? Like you want to be able to really control that narrative. And again, kind of like leading with positivity, even if the situation wasn't that great, it sets that optimistic tone that I think you need to have.
I've done that quite a bit, actually, when I'm leaving jobs that I wasn't happy with, still framing it in a positive way. It's almost like a breakup, right? Like it's not you, it's me.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. And I think like that's the thing, and when you're in that employee mindset is, people don't leave jobs. They often leave their bosses or they leave the people that they're working with, right? Mm-hmm. So Allon, like when you're thinking about some of those jobs that come to mind, what was going on that compelled you to leave? Like maybe some of the bad stuff, but then how were you able to still walk away with like a positive message of like, hey, it's been real. Thank you so much. And here's where I'm going next. And I learned so much or
Right,
whatever.
sure. Well,
Yeah.
when I had first moved to New York, I worked in a mail room for a while.
Yeah.
And it was a great stepping stone job. I had
Sure.
work, right?
Yeah.
So you show up in
It's
a
paying the
city.
bills. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I knew I was going to leave eventually, but
Yeah.
I did the best job I could all the way up until the end. I didn't get frustrated and start to slack off
Yeah.
in the last 20% of my working time there. So I
Yeah.
think that helped everything as well. This isn't even worth doing anymore. Well, you're going
Yeah.
to show up to work. You should do a good job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and so
Yeah.
then that I think that was helpful for me. It is kind of like there's two sides to the brain. Like I really want out of this job, but I know I'm going to do a good job at the same time. So
Yeah.
it's almost like, is it hiding?
Like covering or
Yeah.
hiding? Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that's a form of covering because you can't, this is one of those areas when you are working for someone else, you're in the workplace. This is, I mean, it's almost like third rail, like not talking about salary. Like if you know you're
Mhm.
going to leave, oftentimes you have to kind of keep that close to your chest until you're at the point of like, hey, here's my 2 weeks notice, or depending on whatever the process is and where you work, sometimes it's like you need a month or two because of there's other interdependencies of people that you manage and all that stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
job had offered me a promotion as well. They wanted me to be the lead of the mailroom,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So
And
now
you're
it's
like,
like,
meanwhile, I'm starting my music career. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. It's like, I have bigger aspirations, but thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's really tricky. I think it's This is one of those things. That's why for folks in this, where you're at right now, I highly recommend, we'll have this in the show notes, but definitely checking out Martha's article because I think she does a really skillful job at just outlining what she did and just living here in Portland and seeing her still navigate those relationships with people that she still used to work with. Clearly, she was successful in maintaining those positive relationships. One of the things that she said in the article that I think is relevant here as well, and this goes to, so Allon, when you left the mailroom, did you just give them 2 weeks notice or did you give them a little bit longer?
I think I gave them a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And I might have even expressed at one point, I'm really looking to do other things now. So it wasn't a shock as well.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is no one wants to be surprised. So she writes about that as well of like, consider the people that it's usually your boss and maybe some of the higher ups of like giving them that advance notice of like, hey, I really appreciate this. Like reiterate that again and again. This opportunity is great. It's helped me do X, Y, and Z. Even if it's like, it's helped me pay my bills and like move into being a musician full time, whatever that is, right? But then consider whatever is the process or the culture of if you need 2 weeks, if you need longer, the formal side of it. But the thing that she says in her article is lead with a people first approach rather than whatever the process is. And I think that's where it comes to those relationships. So the people that need to know first, your boss, higher ups, not catching people off guard, and especially like people that they may not be your boss, but they could be, someone that's really integral to who you are. So I know that some people talk about work spouses, work wives, work husbands, work gender friends, whoever they are, what I mean? Like those really important people that have your back. Chances are you're probably in conversation with them about, if you're planning to leave or not, but really consider those relationships as well, because you don't want to be the last person to know, right? So kind of step into the shoes of your colleagues of like, who really needs to know in advance and who might feel like I'm letting them down, but, giving them that advance notice.
And how far in advance as well, because words have legs.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So how far in advance? And again, that goes to, your workplace culture the best. And it's tricky, and I think it could be anywhere between 2 weeks and 2 months. And I think anything longer than the 2-month period can feel like it's probably too advance notice,
That makes sense. And then once you've gone through the process also of like giving your notice, then there's kind of no going back. So that's a really positive thing about starting your own business. You're like, now I've dug this hole. Better jump in it.
Yes. Okay, so let's go there. Let's go to you've now taken the leap, right? So you've taken the leap and you're working up to that final day. The transition from employee mindset to entrepreneur mindset takes some time. And I think like the first piece that really takes some time is mapping out the cushion of resources that you need, because recognizing that if had you not started a side hustle, so you're already bringing in revenue in for your business. So say the end date of when you're leaving your job is the beginning date of starting your business. You're going to want to have anywhere between 2 months of living expenses, like basic, you can pay your bills, you have a little bit of disposable income left. You're going to want, ideally, and this is not always the case, right? But ideally, to have like or Susie Orman will always say, have 6 months of living expenses, which is great,
Yeah, it sounds great.
But, that's a lot of money. So what is it going to take for you to save that? So you might want to hang on to that job a little while longer until you have that cushion, because it does take some time to generate the revenue money-making machine of your company. And you want to have positive cash flow. You want to know where your sales are coming from. And so that's a lot to consider, but planning that out will, as much as you can, really save a lot of anxiety. It will limit the fear. The fear definitely won't go away, but it will at least kind of keep that in check. That is the ideal. It's not always possible. Sometimes people don't have the luxury of giving 2 weeks notice. Sometimes people get fired and this is the next thing, and that's totally okay too. This is a different circumstance. But if you are in control right now, you're gainfully employed, this conversation is primarily for you.
Right. And then with that in mind, what about the planning process? And this is going back to the first part a little bit. Do you physically write out an outline? Do you type up a thing? Do you dream board it? I mean...
Yeah. Well, I like that. I like that question. And I think that's going to depend on who you are, right? So we've got a lot of creative entrepreneurs who listen, maybe get a giant blank canvas and literally pull out the paint and just kind of like imagine visually with your paints, like what the future looks like with your business. Or, I'm more type A. I'm a writer for sure. So for me, it literally is like, what's my personal strategic plan? What's my goal in terms of what needs to get done in this job that I'm in right now to set up the next person for success? That's really important to me. Like integrity, leaving something better than when I first received it is really what I strive to do. And when I work with clients, that's definitely a goal, certainly with a job. And so like just kind of considering the very last job that I had before I got started in my business, I knew about 6 months out that I knew at the end of, I officially got started in January of 2016. In June of 2015, I knew December 31st, that would be the last day that I would be employed by someone else. And that was a big deal for me. It was like kind of, in the context of the show, it was like coming out to myself first.
Right.
And I was like, whoa. I mean, that was the beginning of a mindset shift for me, was that moment. And I knew, I felt overwhelmed by making that kind of decision just in my mind. And so because I'm like a writer, I just started journaling and I started to do like visualization exercises of what are the skills that I have now and how could that be applied to a consulting business and how could I really help people? What are the problems out there that I need to solve? I was kind of thinking about the business idea. So a lot of what we talked about in the previous minisode, that's where I was at in kind of like the 6 months when I made that decision. And it wasn't until September that I started to map out more so who needs to know about my departure and kind of the order of operations. So I was working for the city of New York. I was working closely with the commissioner of the child welfare and juvenile justice agencies in New York. And obviously that was the first person that I needed to have an internal conversation with, because the work that I was doing was really about improving services for all LGBT stakeholders throughout the city systems of very vulnerable populations. And so the work was very successful, but it was very fragile. And finding that next successor was super, super important to continue. And so it was like my baby.
I was just going to say that. I was exactly going to say that same thing. It sounds like your baby. And now, was that one of your dream jobs?
Yeah. It was exactly, I had come from an advocacy background, a policy government background. Even when I was in grad school, I knew I wanted to work on LGBT policy. And I had, this was at NYU, in 2006, I had some professors saying, good luck finding a job like that. Well,
right.
And there have been many jobs like that since then, but,
that might have been motivation.
Oh, it was totally motivation, that was the point where there were laws that were on the books in New York City protecting LGBT people. There were policies in place in the organization that I was at. And really, what I was helping them do was implement all of those things and translating it into guidance, making sure staff understood it, making sure systems were able to honor LGBT people through recognizing who they are and connecting them with the services that they needed. So it was very much, so much work was accomplished over 4 years that I was there. It was a difficult decision to leave, but I knew I could help more organizations like the one I was working for if I had my own business. Right?
And you could potentially still work for them through your own company.
Exactly. And similar, like when we had Martha on the show a while back, it was a public position. It was a very high up public position. So I couldn't do that for a certain period of time after, right? So it was like both maintaining really positive relationships, using relationships that I had outside of New York City to start generating work, knowing that in the future I could certainly work with that agency, but there was a period of like 1 to 2 years.
Oh, that's basically a long time.
Yeah. And so when you're thinking about moving past the fear, most of my relationships were in Washington, D.C. and New York City. I was moving out to Portland to start a business. I was like, okay, this is a leap of faith, but I had worked with people in a pro bono fashion doing similar work like what my business does now. So the reach that I had, I felt confident that I could, once I reintroduced myself to the world and what I was doing, I felt confident. But that's the thing, is when you're shifting from employee mentality to business owner, how do you reintroduce yourself to old colleagues that are like, oh, you're the LGBT policy guy?
That's exactly what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, right. And at first it felt like I was an actor kind of playing a role of like, hi, I'm Rhodes Perry. I'm the founder and CEO of Rhodes Perry Consulting. I was like, this feels different, versus like, I am this important person working for this important organization. It was all on me. And I think the more I started to say it, I just became it, right? It's kind of like the I am. This is the power of declaring who you are in the world. And I don't know, what was it like for you when you're just kind of like, I'm a musician, I'm a sound engineer, I own this podcast company?
Well, it was, when you said leap of faith, that resonated with me because the little woo factor here.
Yes.
I think the universe likes it when you do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm taking a chance.
Yeah.
Come along with me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it goes to that manifestation principle where you are confident enough that you put it out there. It's kind of like this Nietzsche quote where it's like, I'm going to butcher it, but it's basically like your why. Like if you understand why you're doing something, that will endure anyhow. So if you don't know how to do it, that's basically the quote, but it's, if you don't know how to start your own business, or say you have this really amazing idea for a tech app, but you don't have the coding background, it doesn't matter. Like if you understand why it's needed and how it will help and how it's in alignment with your purpose, you'll figure it out. Everything is figure outable. I think that's a Marie Forleo quote or something like that. But anyway, I'm giving lots of quotes here, but the idea is the universe does like that. If you declare it, it will happen. It might not happen on the timeline that you want, right? So when we were talking about making a plan, you might say in 6 months, I'm gonna start out on my own. Chances are you're not gonna have all of that figured out, and the universe might not work quick enough for you, but it's starting to set things up for you. And if you're open enough to it, and you're curious enough, and you kind of follow the opportunities, and you're not too rigid about it, chances are whatever you put out, whatever that vision is, it's gonna be way bigger than what you thought it would be, if you're open to it. Hey, Out Bosses, Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBT entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business. To know that you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting business. In fact, I'm on a mission to empower leaders just like you and those on their way to joining us to cultivate cultures of belonging. In my upcoming book, Belonging at Work, I share some of my personal struggles of coming out as a trans guy in the workplace and how I leverage this experience as one of my business superpowers. Now, I'm on a mission to support you in taking simple actions that will make a world of difference for anyone who has ever felt as if they needed to hide important aspects of themselves on the job. When you commit to purchasing a special, limited edition copy of the book, a portion of your purchase will support expanding workplace opportunities for fellow transgender and non-binary people. An added bonus, your story about what it means to belong at work will be featured on the book's website to inspire others. You're ready to belong at work now. To learn more, visit rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type the word belong. Again, that's rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type belong. I think for me, and take it with a grain of salt, it's just don't pigeonhole yourself. And when you're setting goals, make them big, make them audacious, don't kind of like do the incremental thing because you're limiting yourself, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I've used that before too, where I'm like, my goal is so big, like even if I get 70% there,
yes,
it's awesome.
I know. And it's amazing. It's amazing. For folks who've listened to this podcast for a long time, one of the major reasons why I started the podcast was I knew I wanted to build a really successful business, and it would take mentorship. It would take connecting with people who are much further ahead on the path. And so I wanted to connect with as many people as possible. And I also wanted to connect with as many people as possible that I knew were in alignment with their authentic selves, that were showing up 100% who they are in the world, super comfortable in their skin. And so it just made sense, like being a part of the Rainbow family. Why not start this podcast where I'm interviewing other LGBT business owners, many of whom are way further down on the path. And so I'm like, one of the kind of like big interviews I had was with Bob Whittick, who I'm sure many folks know. It's just like a really, really effective business owner and someone who absolutely 100% continues to give back to LGBT communities. I was like, when I interviewed him, I was like, whoa, this is exactly why I started the show, And I think that's been really helpful too, is to start talking with other people who've already done it. Because I think like once you start owning, okay, I'm a business owner, you will start to attract other business owners who are excited by your energy and want to support, they want to find ways to support you, but they don't know that you're a business owner unless you say it. So start doing like mirror work, like every night in the mirror, be like, I am a badass business owner. I'm an LGBT boss. I'm an out entrepreneur, whatever you need to say. Start doing that because your thoughts are everything. Your thoughts become things.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And also that's good. That goes into networking, of course, as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the networking piece is huge. And, it's kind of this concept of thinking like a business owner and connecting and getting support. The other thing that I want to say, outside of like you've saved however much you can save, you've saved as much as you can to have a little bit of a cushion. Also recognize like when getting started, you can get overwhelmed pretty quickly. So small steps, progress, not perfection. And also recognize you're going to be working a lot. You could be working 24/7 if you want to do that. So set some parameters around your ideal work week. If you want to take Fridays off, then start building it in now. Like however you want to structure how you work. You like to work from 6 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. Good for you. That is not me, but like some people like,
that's actually really good advice. Like set it up like a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. From the
these
beginning.
Hours, right. 5 days a week, 8 days a week, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the other thing, I still need to take this advice because I have not done this, but I will throw it out there. Every year I do kind of a CEO day with a couple of people, a couple of peers on the path. One of the exercises we always do every year is to look at your job description that you wrote for yourself, the ideal job description. And if you're stepping into the CEO role, the idea is eventually you are just the visionary of your company. You don't do anything else. You've delegated everything. So how do you set the vision, right? But like, what are your everyday responsibilities? How do you evaluate your own performance? Just like a one-page job description. If you can do that now, because you have the luxury of, you don't have to worry about doing the work of your business right now, write that ideal job description. Like when you think about being a business owner, when you think about being a CEO, look at some of the other job descriptions for CEOs that are out there and write in what that ideal dream job looks like. The more you can get specific around that, you will eventually get there. But just trust when you first get started, you're going to be doing everything. But eventually, the goal is you delegate as much as you can until you're just left with that role of being the visionary. So I would highly, highly recommend that, because that will help you get into the mindset of being a business owner, and also starting to think about, I'm going to be working a lot more than if I was just working 9 to 5 and I could leave my job at my job when I left, because that's up for my own, when I'm wearing the employee mindset, that was up to someone else that I was working for. You're not going to have that anymore. That's one of the trade-offs. But if you can start setting those parameters now, I think you're going to be in good shape. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever written like a job description for yourself?
I think I have mentally.
Okay.
But that kind of makes sense. I mean, maybe I could send myself a resume and see if I would hire myself as a kind of check and balance or something.
Yeah. It's like that. Yeah. It's like you've got the resume on one side, but it's like, what's the job description that you're applying for? That's one thing that if you're listening to this, hold me accountable to, because I will be doing that again in December. And that was one of my deliverables, at least over this year, is to write that job description. And I haven't yet, but I should. I could. No more shoulds.
You will.
I will. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, I will. All right. So I've got that. Let's see. The other thing is, like, we talked a little bit about reintroducing yourself. So think about not just reintroducing yourself. So, hey, I'm Rhodes. I'm the founder and CEO of this business. But how do you position yourself? Why are you the CEO, right, of the thing that you lead? So, Allon, you are the CEO of
Pod to the People.
Pod to the People. Sorry,
it's all good.
I know. How do you best position yourself when people are like, "Well, there's lots of other companies out there. Why would I work with you?"
Which there are, by the way.
Yeah,
I was surprised.
Yeah. But like, what are some of the things that you differentiate yourself from?
Well, I think you have to sell yourself. So I have a lot of experience, and I've done work all around the world.
Yep.
So these are the things I'm going to try to count on, my past experience and positive experiences that other people will latch onto, and hopefully feel positive about it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that, which is just kind of like, chances are when you're starting a business, you have some background experience in the thing that you're doing, right? So for Allon, musician, knows how to like be a badass sound engineer, has experience doing podcast ideation, coming up with a podcast topic for a potential host, helping them think about all of the bazillion things that you need to do to make the podcast come from the recording to get it out into the world on the computer, right? And so there's real lived experience in that over decades of just being in the world of sound and audio, right? And like similar for me, I'm doing work around organizational change, working with executives, doing leadership development, doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And that's all based on 20 plus years of doing that work, working for someone else. But it's about how you package that up, how you package your expertise, your authority in whatever area you're in, and then stitch it into your business. That is what makes your business different, because it's you and your style leading it with all of those years of experience that come with the package of the business, if that makes sense. And I think it's really, really important to do two things. The first is, in one sentence, who are you helping and how are you doing it? So I always say I help leaders build workplace cultures of belonging. Real simple. There's a lot to that. But if someone's like, what do you do? I mean, other than I help people be nice to each other,
right.
But that's kind of the one sentence type thing. So how would you frame what you do in one sentence? And then the other piece is then if you had a paragraph of describing how you get there, it's worth writing that out and what informs your work. Just remember that like when you're trying to sell the thing to whoever you're selling your thing to, they don't really care about your process. Someone in sales once said this to me, which I think is really helpful. If you're flying to Tahiti, they don't care about the type of plane that you're flying on. They don't care about, my gosh, if you're sitting in coach, they don't want to be reminded that they'll be squished in their seats or whatever. They want to know about the destination. So describe to them the final destination and what that's going to look like and feel like. Imagine being in Tahiti with like I've never been to Tahiti, but it sounds like a really nice place to go to. So just imagine how beautiful it is, right? And that's what you want to do. So like for Allon in the world of podcasts, imagine when your podcast is out there in the world and like the impact that's going to have on everyone when they get to hear your voice, right?
And like focusing on the end product instead of the process.
Exactly. Yeah. Imagine what it'd be like if everyone in your workplace felt a sense of belonging. Imagine how productive people would be. Imagine how collaborative, how innovative. Imagine, da 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 da. Like that's what you're describing to the people that you're working with. When you're reintroducing yourself, just who are you helping? How are you doing it? And like, what's the thing that's gonna result from working with you? Like, if you can keep that in mind, that will definitely help you with just talking about with confidence what you're doing next after you leave your job. We talked a little bit the last time about ideal clients, so we're not going to really get into that on this mini-sode, though I imagine we will talk a lot about marketing in the future, so don't worry about it. The only other few things that I want to kind of just reiterate is the schedule of each day. So we talked about setting parameters for yourself. Also, I think it's worth just kind of reminding folks, like, if you want to be like Tim Ferriss and have a 4-hour work week, you're not going to be there on day one when you're your own CEO, but imagine what that would be like, and the how will fill itself in. But if that's really what you want to do, if you only want to work 4 hours a week, what would it take to build a business where you only work 4 hours a week? Which I think for some people that sounds amazing. For other people, you might think, oh my God, there's all these other hours. I can have like 16 other businesses,
There's
like
that, right. So the vision.
Yeah, the vision. It's the vision of like what does your day look like? How many days do you work? What's the time frame? And it's going to be different for everybody. It's also worth, like, you're doing all this now. I would highly recommend, it's worth going back and revisiting. I try to do that quarterly. I look at quarterly goals that I have. I usually set 90-day goals, which is 3 months. And then at the end of the year, I sit down with other business owners that are kind of in the same place that I am or a little bit further ahead. And we vision what the next year is going to be like. So that's definitely worth it. The other thing for right now, and it goes along with kind of longer hours, is, expect to do a lot of things yourself. DIY, do it yourself. Unless you have like a lot of venture capital or if you've saved up a lot of money, which is awesome, good for you. There's just still going to be a lot of things in the early stages where you're in startup mentality, and everything from answering your own emails to cleaning your office to doing the actual work that you're doing for your customers or your clients to the visioning, which is truly really your role. You're doing it all, and that's okay. And I think it kind of goes back to getting that support that you really need.
Yeah. And what about goals? Let's say, do you set like a really hard goal, or, what happens when you don't reach those goals?
Yeah. I always think it's like a map. And in the work that I do a lot of strategic planning. And so you have to have a vision to work towards, right? You have to be clear on what you're working towards, the ultimate vision. And the goals are almost like coordinates, on a map of like, I want to find the buried treasure. And it's like all the way around the world. There's a zillion different paths to get to that treasure all the way around the world. But it's the course that you've initially set out in your plan.
Mm-hmm.
Hurricanes happen, storms happen. Smooth water is somewhere else, like
your flight was delayed.
Yeah, there's a mountain. You got to walk around the mountain. You know what I mean? So all of that, it will for sure shift the kind of short term and even some of the longer term goals that you have. And that's okay. That's okay so long as you don't lose sight of where you ultimately want to be. And that's often what I share with leaders when we're doing some of the broader change management work that I do in my own business. And it's all about course correcting. And you have to build in that evaluation time, that kind of thinking time, that when you do truly get really busy with like the services or the products that you're creating for customers or clients, it's really easy to be like, you know what, that whole planning thing that I was going to do, that whole strategic planning thing, doing the budget stuff, I'll get to that next week. And you keep pushing it out and pushing it out and pushing it out. And pretty soon you lose sight of where you're going. So something to consider is really figuring out how often you're going to check in on your vision, your values, your goals, because that's everything. That is everything. And it's shocking to me in small businesses and super large corporations how sometimes that important work, that important thinking work really gets brushed under the rug. Anyway, that's what I say. Like, I mean, you can't be too rigid about goals, but I think you do have to be rigid about your vision and why you're traveling towards that vision. Because otherwise, if you're traveling halfway around the world, you're going to get lost on the way. If you forget about, I want to be in Tibet in 12 months from now or something, right? Lots of ways to get there. And there's no necessarily right or wrong way. You just want to kind of limit the harm it could do to other people or to yourself. You want to have time. You want to enjoy your life too. And you want to get to your ultimate destination, I guess, Tahiti, Tibet, wherever that might be.
Don't get stuck in China.
Don't get stuck in China if you don't want to be in China. Some people want to be in China. That's
right?
Okay.
It's so close to Tibet.
I know, yeah.
You're
Some would say
there.
it is Tibet.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have to free. Yeah,
right.
Okay. That's a whole other podcast, but we can talk about that too. I think we've covered a lot of ground. So we talked about the employee mindset, like leaving your job, what does it take? And what does it take to really authentically, confidently step into that role as business owner?
What does it take? This is probably going to come up every single time, and this is personal, something I'm going through is burnout.
Oh, yeah. That is, burnout. So let's talk about that. That will be, okay, that potentially, maybe not the next minisode, but we will definitely dedicate a minisode to this, and I think that's really key too. Burnout. So we will talk about some strategies to make sure that we never get to that place, but that is very real. And the thing about burnout is if you don't put strategies and structures in place leading up to that feeling of burnout, that legit could end up into some kind of nervous breakdown. You know what I mean? And this is one of those things in entrepreneurial space where I'm starting to see a little bit more in the literature around mental health and really how to take care of yourself, because there's been some pretty prominent entrepreneurs who've completed suicide or have been in some pretty dark places. So thinking about my partner who is a mental health, she's a therapist, that's something that I care a lot about. And so I want to be careful I want to dedicate a whole minisode to that. I would say for shifting from employee to entrepreneur, it's easy to be tempted to do all of the things at once because you're so energized. I mean, I remember those, like that first year I got started, I was like, this is amazing. I'm my own boss and I can do all these things. And you're more inclined to say yes, 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 yes to so many opportunities that are definitely in alignment. But I think it's also the art of saying no to almost everything, unless, like when we had Martha on the show, unless it is a hell yes,
then it's a no.
Then it's a no, and try to get into that practice early on, even though that will be very hard, because especially when you're trying to generate revenue, you may say yes to projects where it's like, I know I can totally do that, but that's not what I want this business to be. So you got to find that balance in the beginning. But the more that you can start getting into that flow of, no, this is not what I do. Let me refer it out to like the 9 million other people that I know who can do this really well. And then the more that you say no, the closer you get to your dream clients and the yeses that are like, oh my God, this is the dream project, or this is the dream collaboration to build some tech app or whatever the thing is that you're doing. I think that's probably my best advice right now with the limited time that we have left to kind of really address how do you prevent burnout, short of the other thing that I was really intentional about when I got started in my business, which was every quarter, like I do some thinking time on the business, but then I have a vacation, and it's like at limit 1 week of just like nothing. Like I'm going out. I mean, I'm a big nature outdoors person. So it's like I'm going camping. All of these little devices that are connected to all these satellites, they're off. I'm like recharging on planet Earth as a human.
Then do you set up an auto response, or how do you make sure people know that that's what's going down?
Yeah, I do the auto response, and with clients that I'm currently doing projects with, I just let them know. The longer vacations I take a pretty long. August is like conference time, and then also vacation time. So pretty much the whole month of August is just shut down. And that kind of works with my business because a lot of the clients that I work with are either involved with government, nonprofit, they're in corporate settings, but either their kids are on vacation then, so they're kind of half checked out at the job, or it's just like everything's shut down because it's just, that's the cycle of year. So that works out really well. And then the other time that I kind of shut down completely is kind of those last 2 weeks of December and the first 2 weeks of January. And so I have family in Florida, I visit them, and that's usually, I will, even though I'm technically not working, I'll work on a creative project. So like 2 years ago, that's when I worked on my book, and that just gives me brain space to actually think about reflection time. But I would say, even if like you can't travel anywhere, that's okay. Just like build in that time of stopping the day-to-day stuff to just do something that you love, because you are your own boss. And the more you can build in that vacation or kind of like you time that you need to recharge, that's just going to help you be better when you show back up in the workplace. Because the last thing you want to do is be burnout, trying to do everything for everyone. And then that's when things start falling through the cracks. And
that makes sense. And it keeps you excited as well.
Yeah.
So like, I did such a good job, I get a vacation.
Yeah. I mean, I think that celebrating successes early on is really key. Even if it's the success of like, whoa, I got my LLC, yay, like do something nice, have a bubble bath, like really simple stuff, but like the stuff that reminds you like you're not just this transactional robot, but you're a human and you deserve pleasure. You deserve to like take a break. You deserve to have relationships with people outside of professional space. And that's going to just help you be more balanced. And then when you show back up, with your clients or your customers, you're happy, you're happier. You don't always have to be happy 100% of the time, but you're doing things that fill you up with life. And just don't lose sight of that too. And it's very easy. It's very tempting just to be like, oh, just 15 more minutes. Let me get this email out. And trust me, I've been there. And then fortunately, I have people in my life who are like, dude, you need to chill, like take a break.
You're probably not as efficient at that time anyway.
No, definitely not. I mean, know your kind of like your cycle every day, your cycle through the seasons. There's certainly different seasons where I often think it's so weird, right? Like winter is a time of slowness and stillness. And yet like the first of the year, it's like, and here we are, and we're starting with these new goals and resolutions. And it's just like, it's so counter to our kind of natural rhythms with the planet, So for me, like, I feel like the more active times for my business are the spring and the fall, and the winter and the summer winter definitely for me is more reflection. And summer is really more of like, get out in the world and see some stuff. And don't always be stuck in your business, talking about business, blah, blah.
Yeah, I use the winter like that as well.
Yeah.
Like get a chance to slow down and kind of reassess to some extent as well.
Yeah. Maybe one of the minisodes we can do is more like on woo practices, because I feel like seasons is really important to think through of how to kind of like use the energy of the seasons. And also, I mean, this is real woo for some people, but just thinking about moon cycles too, for me, like if you follow kind of my work closely on newsletters, usually I'll put out like new ideas around the new moon, it's kind of like manifesting ideas. And like, if I have a book or something that comes out, that's usually around a full moon. So it's like kind of releasing some kind of like product into the world or service or whatever. So, and it's cool. It's like there's some kind of...
There is a physical push-pull happening there.
Exactly. It's enough to move the oceans from high tide to low tide. So, energetically, there's a flow. And if you can kind of work with that flow in your business, wow. Like, I mean, there's a lot of power to that. And, I know for some listeners that might be a little challenging on the woo side, but we are recording this in Portland, Oregon, so that's part of our culture and we own it.
And also, if we do an episode about the woo, that basically ties into replenishing and relaxation and taking care of yourself as well.
Oh yeah. So I think we've got a number of topics here. So we've got the woo, we've got the self-care, time management. Oh my gosh, marketing, sales. We can talk about that too. Self-promotion. Yeah. So all of this is to say we're winding down this minisode. I found this to be really fun, and I hope for listeners, I hope you're enjoying these. It's a new experiment. So please send us some feedback. outentrepreneur@gmail.com is a way to communicate directly. We have our Facebook community, which is Out Entrepreneur. We're on all the social media. If you like to tweet at us at Out Entrepreneur. And let's see, probably iTunes. If you want to leave a comment, that's the best place where at least I check pretty regularly. So let us know what you think. You can find out some of the resources that we shared, including Martha's article, will be found on our website at outentrepreneur.com. And you can text OUTBOSS to 444999, and we can connect you that way. And that's it. Allon, do you have anything else that you want to share?
If anyone has ideas of subjects that we should cover, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I would love that. So yeah, please send them our way. And as always, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.